welcome everyone who has joined us today for this webinar on ensuring safe and secure mobile device use, where we'll be sharing best practices for teachers. So this webinar is organized by the British Council English Grants Program, and it's going to be led by the British Council Safeguarding team. It's a pleasure to have you here today. It's also a pleasure to have the Ellen and Fiona. I'm sure Ellen is going to join us in a minute, but actually Fiona is our regional child protection manager for SSA in MENA, and she's also obviously everything that's regarding safeguarding. And we also have Ellen who will be joining us soon. But before we start, I'd just like to share some housekeeping items, so we can actually have a smooth session. First of all, if you could just keep your microphone muted throughout the webinar to avoid any background noise and interruptions. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat box, and we'll address them within the webinar or during the Q&A session. This session is also going to be recorded and will be made available for playback after the event. So if you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your camera. The slides used in the webinar will also be shared with you after the event. You receive an email with a link to access them. And if you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to notify us. So without further ado, I will just give the floor to Fiona, so we can start the session. Thanks, Fiona. Over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending which time zone you're in. But it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak and discuss and share with you this afternoon on all things around online safety or online risks. Terminologies I move around all the time, but we'll generally talk about digital safety in recognition of the risks that exist in the virtual and digital spaces and online platforms that we engage in, that support the delivery of our work, and that are pretty much part and parcel of our day-to-day interactions and communications. So I just want to introduce, well, I've already been introduced, but I support the region of Sub-Saharan Africa in leading on our safeguarding agenda, and joined by Elaine Ryan. Elaine, do you want to introduce yourself, perhaps? Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Steve, Fiona, and all other participants online. My name's Elaine Ryan, and I'm Global Head of Safeguarding based in the UK. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Yeah, so I just wanted to set the scene pretty much in recognition of managing expectations of what we're going to talk about today. I understand there is a specific requirement to equip you and support you in being able to work with specific apps that you're using in the delivery of your program. But also tips and hacks on how to support learners within the classroom environment, especially where you have to use specific apps. Now, given the hour that we have and the detail that's involved in that, we will not go into those specifics on our call today. Rather, we're going to set a generic scene on what the risks are and why it's important for us to understand where and how these risks manifest. However, we have a set of tools to delve into this particular detail, and we'll be sharing these with Steve for Onward Cascade with you, and it will require you to have some time and just review and understand the detail therein, because if I just do like WhatsApp, it will be like one whole hour. If we look at, say maybe Zoom. So in recognition of that, and the fact that we have well-developed resources, we'll be sharing these with you separately. But for our call and our hour today, it's generally understanding and appreciating how online risk presents and manifests itself, and then more importantly, what it is that we need to be aware of. So just wanted to provide that preamble, just so that we manage our expectations. Trying to see where to move this so you can see my screen. Okay, this might be the lowest I can drop it. Anyway, so I really wanted to make reference to the continent and this region specifically in how online abuse exists or has been documented. And there is a lot of information out there, but also there is parts of this information that have not yet necessarily been well researched and hence documented. But something important to recognize, and perhaps more specifically over the last 2 years when the whole world essentially went into lockdown, is the rapid acceleration of digital technology. It caught up really fast because we were really only able to communicate and interact as a world using digital technology. And this, in as much as it was a good thing, as with all good things, there tends to be a downside. The downside to that is was or has been an increase in online abuse, where perhaps we used to maybe work with small numbers of people who are victims and susceptible to abuse online. Because now everybody suddenly was in this space, it meant that more people became vulnerable to abuse. And the prevalence of this type of abuse, specifically against women and girls, globally also increased. And when you actually do research, you'll find that there is real evidence that speaks to how women and girls are particularly more vulnerable to online abuse. I mean, I guess it's almost like a mirror of what you see in the physical world, women and girls being highly more vulnerable to specific forms of abuse. And so even in the online space, this is what has been seen. When you talk about literature that specifically looks at cyberbullying, there is a whole range of data that shows varying statistics and how this is manifesting in different countries on this continent. Specifically, looking at use of, say, an application like Facebook, how many people were using Facebook, say in 2018 before lockdown, and how many people suddenly are using this app. So that just really speaks to the fact that the risk in online abuse and elements of online abuse and how it manifests, which we'll look at in a short while, has suddenly gone up, and therefore requires us to be aware, to be attentive, and to just tread carefully in terms of knowing where the risks are, and in that same thread be able to put in place the necessary controls that support us. Because like I say, technology is great, and all the advancement and the evolvement that has happened has allowed us to do amazing things, such as in our program, this particular one, but it's just a recognition of the risks that come with that and what we need to do to be able to mitigate and manage and be able to safely interact and engage and deliver our programs. So when we talk about online abuse, what are we in principle talking about, or what are we making reference to? And as I've said, it's any sort of abuse that would happen through the use of assisted technology, the devices that support us in our work, whether these be computers or tablets or mobile phones or any other really internet enabled devices. And some of the ways where this abuse will happen is through these different social network platforms. Many of these you would be familiar with, you're using them or have heard about them, things like Facebook, but also we have text messaging applications, things like WhatsApp, very handy, very easy to, cascade and share information. We also have email and private messaging platforms that are also, I'm sure a good number of you at one point in time, because we've used these a lot more than perhaps the others, email and private messaging, you have scam or, phishing, emails that are soliciting specific information. Online chat apps is also another space where we are seeing abuse manifesting itself. Zoom is a particular one that I know this program will be using. So important to be aware of what risks can happen in using a platform like this. Live streaming sites, voice chats, in games. So these are some of the spaces where we have seen and continue to see online abuse being manifested, and the gadgets that we use to support us in this digital engagement. So just really to draw attention to the breadth of spaces and where it is that we might need to focus our attention specifically. In speaking about online abuse, something that I just wanted to have the opportunity to reflect upon that's quite unique to this particular type of abuse is around the concept of being re-victimized. And this specifically is seen in the way content is recorded, content is uploaded, and content is shared again and again and again. Something that has always stopped me in my boots every time I'm about to post something online or, basically pass on any information, is the recognition of the fact that once it's left my inbox or whatever and gone out there, I have no control over that information, meaning there are people who have made it their 9-to-5 job to hack into various spaces. And once they get hold of that information, then they're pretty much at liberty to use it in whatever way they want to. Now, of course, we know that the same way in our physical interaction and spaces, we have people that are out to abuse and, offend others. These people do also exist in the virtual spaces. And so a recognition of the fact that when images, are put out there, when information is put out there, that it can be very difficult to remove from these sites and it can remain there, meaning that it can be reviewed again and again. So if it's information that is abusive in nature, think about hate speech, indecent images, people have the opportunity to use it again and again. And what that means for the individuals for whom this information is about is that they're being re-victimized, they're being abused again and again. So it's something that is quite, I don't want to say unique, but very important to appreciate with online abuse and how it has that unfortunate element that allows victims to be subjected to repeated abuse due to the information that is utilized again and again. So it's something that I just wanted to draw our attention on. And obviously the recognition that behind every image and video that you see, is an individual that has been a victim of abuse. So if you're ever in receipt of any inappropriate content, whether it's personal information or images, the responsibility on you is to not then pass it on. You do make a report of it, but it's not responsible to pass it on, and actually passing it on can be an offense and can be something that can be can be a breach of law in certain contexts. So just being mindful of that. And so when we talk about online safeguarding risks, I just wanted to share a few examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but some of the more common risks that we see within when we talk about online safety, or what are some of the risks that we see. So cyberbullying, which is just really a translation of the bullying that would happen in the physical space, but is now taken into the virtual space. You know, children, adults are all susceptible to this type of abuse. Something that's also quite common, sexual and financial exploitation. Again, there was research and studies that showed a significant surge in this type of abuse, especially during the 2 years when you know, many economies were in lockdown. People were desperate to get working again, and you know, being asked to, you know, ask for exchange of sexual favors, or exploited to give money so they can get you know, job opportunities. Then sexual abuse itself, you know, is also another form of online abuse that we see. And again, children and adults being equally susceptible to this. You know, you've maybe at some point in your interaction, especially many of you who are teachers, had maybe from your learners, you know, information that is deemed pornographic in nature, you know, and how we protect these young people from that sort of information. But aligned to that is also grooming, because before these children are actually abused, you know, the people that are out to offend will have gone through an opportunity of grooming these young people and adults as well, although we know that children are more susceptible to this type of abuse, or, you know, people using false identity, going into spaces where children are, you know, are in terms of, you know, content that is designed for children, and gaining their trust, and therefore, you know, starting to lure them in, and eventually asking them, you know, to share inappropriate content. Webcams have also been another element that has facilitated abuse. This whole, you know, we need to almost exist in the same space, whereas we are behind, you know, computer screens, and therefore we need to have cameras on, and how that has facilitated abuse. Sextortion, another form of abuse, which is largely around creating and sharing these indecent images and videos, and then also blackmail, which you know, could take the form of sexual, financial, or indeed emotional. So these are just some of the different risks or types of abuse that we see manifesting in the online space. And it's important for us to have an understanding of how they play out. But I guess when we go into the guide that I made reference to earlier, you'll be able to see specifically what sort of measures you can put in place to protect yourself, but also your end service users from some of these types of abuse. So I just want to pause here, just really reflecting on what I've shared in the first few slides, and allow us to have a moment of reflection. I've made reference to the fact that children are obviously particularly at risk in these online environments due to their evolving cognitive abilities, and the fact that they're not yet fully aware of what is, you know, good and what is bad, what is safe and what isn't. However, it's important to appreciate that adults are equally vulnerable. And like I said, during these last 2 years, 2020, 2021, when the world was in lockdown, adults, you know, found, even those that had never had access to digital spaces, found themselves thrown there, and a good number have become victims, continue to become victims of abuse. So just really important to be aware of this. So I just want to pause for maybe a minute and allow us to reflect on general risks that you perhaps are aware of, have heard of, that children or indeed adults might encounter in their day-to-day settings and environments, whether be it at home or at school or indeed in the general community.
Thanks so much, Fiona. I think yeah, if you have anything that you'd like to share with us, regarding some of these some of the risk that you may actually have witnessed or you have actually even been victim of, you can actually raise your hand and open the mic for you to share. There was a hand raised by Nafisat. Nafisat, if you still would like to say something, please raise your hand so we can give you the floor. Okay, we have Edith who would like to say something. Please, Edith, go ahead. Hi, Edith.
I was trying to ask a question when I was I think there was a network issue and I had to come back in again. All right, now I heard Fiona talking about some of the risk involved in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, some of the risk involved in these online mobile usage and online exploitations and the others. Now, I need to know, because some time ago on our British Council website, I made a comment and somebody commented under my comment and sent a link that I should click it. You know, it was on a second thought that I felt, well, if anybody should be sending me a link on this platform, it should be the British Council. Now, in this case, how do we identify those suspicious links and avoid them? Now, people, I have heard about instances of people being asked to supposed to go through, maybe somebody they met online. Now, how do we identify them? Is there a way of knowing, let's say through a digital means of identifying somebody to be a criminal online? How do we know them?
Thanks, Edith.
Was there another one?
How do we identify criminal? Just that.
Was there another hand, Steve?
Yes, there was another hand. So I'm going to open the floor to Nafisat. Hi, Nafisat.
Yes.
Feel free to.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Please, can you hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I don't know what this online is doing at times. This Phoenix browser now. I am a mother. My children wants to use my phone to do something. Then the notification, all those images they just send in, or the videos they just send in as notifications, is a browser. Oh, you don't even have to open it. But the moment you see the notifications, everything, it is just too raw for children to see. Then I was thinking, okay, fine, I can decide to uninstall this particular browser from my phone. But what about other parents that are not informed and they have this particular browser on their phone? So what happens? Not everyone is illiterate to understand that I have a notification issue and I can always switch it off. So what do we do? Is it that we need to create awareness that Phoenix browser notification is always coming with nude content? Or I don't understand, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Nafisat. So we have another hand.
Okay, we'll take that. Then we can respond to those and
Super.
continue.
Okay. Yes, Emmanuel, over to you.
Thanks. Mine is a concern now that there is this almost everyone now is like having smartphones. Now you find that they're moving around schools, okay, taking photos or even videos of the learners without their consent. Some maybe in the remote villages, etc., etc. And then later on, maybe you find that that photo is home on the social media or anywhere else. I don't know how best maybe such kind of practices or issues can be arrested. It's really, really kind of disturbing because one can be recording the video while you're not aware. All right. So I don't know how best we can deal with such kind of issues. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so maybe we'll respond to those. I'll invite Elaine to chime in. And then I encourage colleagues to keep the questions coming in. Maybe they can drop them in the chat. And then at the end, we can also have another opportunity to respond to some additional questions or indeed points of clarification. So with the first one, where Edith made reference to links that a link was sent, and just generally, how do you verify safe links? And I wish I had a straight answer, but I always say to anyone, if you're not sure of the source, do not open. And I think for me, I always say it's best to be safe than sorry. So if I get, that was, I don't know whether it was a British Council platform or a more generic space, but every time I get anything from any source, whether an email, because we all get like spam emails, you don't really know the source you read, you don't really understand the subject, or maybe it's asking you for unusual information. I just always delete or mark it as spam so that my email filter can ensure that I don't receive those emails again. So for me, I know it's a bit hard to exercise that judgment, but every time I'm not sure, I just delete. And then I trust that if that's really important information that I'm meant to receive, that I will get it again. And also, if I have something that I've received, I'll know to alert our IT team, depending on the setting that you're in. Of course, I'm making reference to a work support team, but if you have that to your disposal, that could also be a good avenue. You just alert them or receive this, and they have the know-how, the technical ability to verify these links and whether they are safe and whether they're genuine in what they're attempting to communicate. So that's what I'll say to that, but I'll invite Elaine to chime in later on. And then on the second one, Nafisat raised a valid one, which is a genuine challenge for many of us as parents, how, and she made a point around those who are illiterate, and that's where the danger is, in the lack of awareness, the lack of knowledge of the risks that exist. And the last colleague made reference to the fact that these days, mobile phones are almost like, having a bottle of water or something that, is at our everyday disposal, and the misuse of these gadgets that are amazing in terms of, enabling us to do so much, but also pose significant risk. And I think for me, the simple response to that is in doubling our efforts to raise this awareness. Where someone doesn't know that there is a risk, they're obviously very, very vulnerable, because they will have a phone, there'll be all these, apps, even some that are designed for children, But the people, like I say, that are bent on abusing and harming young people or even adults generally, they know the spaces to go into. But we have a lot of guidance available now that supports us in being able to know these are some of the practical steps you can take to protect, like your identity, your information, or sense check what you're getting, and it's all available. So some of the guidance that I made reference to earlier actually outlines these specific tips that you can use to further protect yourself in the utilization of these platforms. And then on the last one, they made again another important point around how do we protect young people, how do we protect ourselves in a world where everybody has a phone, is snapping away, is recording away. And they made an important point around consent. Of course, if it's official work, we know that we never take any pictures or videos of anybody unless we've sought their consent and they understand the reason for which we are collecting that information. But of course, people unknowingly get very happy, very excited. There's this amazing, I don't know, thing that I've seen, I want to share it, and they do that. And in that continuous sharing, that's where now the risk is. So again, I put it back to sensitization, helping the people we are working with understand that you have a right to say no to your image or picture being taken unless you're sure how it's going to be used. So they have that right. It's people knowing what is right and what isn't wrong, but also for those taking, knowing and recognizing that if they have to do any documentation using these gadgets, that it's got to be sanctioned, it's got to be with consent, and the individuals involved have got to sign off of it. So I'll pause there and just invite Elaine to pick up our discussion, but please keep those questions coming in using the chat, and at the end we'll also be able to pick up some others. Elaine, over to yourself.
Thank you, Fiona. I think it's really important, the discussions that we're having, and I'm really interested in some of the questions that you've been raising with us, because they're really pertinent and important questions that that needs to be addressed, that needs to be explored, that needs to be unpacked. And as Fiona quite rightly said, we have developed a resource library, tools, resources, assessments that we would really encourage you to have a look at to sensitize, update, upskill yourselves within this area of work. So far, I hope what Fiona shared with you is offers you a clearer understanding of what we mean when we speak about online abuse and exploitation. And Fiona has very clearly illustrated how this type of abuse manifests itself within the online space in terms of the safeguarding risk and the type of abuse that might highlight or might be prevalent within the digital space. So what I now want to do with the next few slides and the next 10 minutes that I have is to just delve a little bit deeper, to just raise some awareness and just bring to your attention some another aspect of the digital risk and some of the areas in which we have a responsibility to ensure, and redirect you to some of our resources. So I just really want to start by saying that when we speak of digital risk, there's a typology that we use, and the typology is categorized into 4 particular areas that will identify the risk, and it relates to the vulnerability that may be faced by both children and adults. And we generally refer to them as the 4 C's. I'm just going to take you through the 4 C's, some of which Fiona has touched on, but I'll take you through the 4 C's. And in doing so, that gives us a clearer understanding of what we mean by digital risk, safeguarding risk, abuse online. So the first risk that I really want to highlight is what we call the contact risk. And that risk really speaks to the fact that victims become involved in interactive situations. And when I say interactive situations, I'm speaking about things like bullying, harassment, and being stalked online. And this is a very, very serious aspect of online abuse, because it then can develop into grooming, sexual exploitation, and so forth. So it's really important to understand what we mean by contact risk. And generally speaking, the perpetrators are very aware of how to access vulnerable adults and children whilst online. They know what platforms to go on, and they know how to encourage this type of contact risk. So it's really important that we are aware that these things might happen, and be aware whilst you're online, whether you're teaching or in your personal life, be mindful of what children are looking at and how they might be exposed to such activities whilst online. So so we generally call this contact risk, and this can happen online. The exploitation can take place online, but very often it continues offline, and then it develops into a real serious type of abuse. So the contact risk is critical, and it's really important that we understand issues around contact risk, because as I said, it leads to grooming, sexual exploitation, and the offenders are really mindful and they have a great understanding of how to navigate through the system and to pinpoint and spot the vulnerable adults and children. So that's what we call contact risk. And then we go to C number 2, and it speaks to content risk. And this includes hateful content, so hateful and harmful content, and to some degree illegal content that might also manifest itself in misinformation. And there's a number of online platforms, and I think one of the questions that was raised earlier on spoke about notification and information coming to us by our browsers. And this is what we're talking about when we speak about contact risk, because we're talking about how information could be shared with individuals, vulnerable children and vulnerable adults. It speaks about how you can harm yourself, how you can, how ways in which you can commit suicide. It gives you tips and hints about doing awful things. And if you're not careful around what comes into your browser, then these types of children are exposed, and vulnerable adults are exposed to these types of things, extremist behavior, self-harming, how to commit suicide, etc., etc. So content risk is very critical within the digital space, and we have to be really mindful of that. And in our resource library, we share with you how you can remove the notification, how you can block these types of content. So that's number 2, and that's the content risk. If we can move on to just have a look at the other 2 types of risk under the C category. And we see that the third one is the conduct risk, and that's where people are often encouraged to participate in risky behavior. So they might say, there might be a platform that says, let's see who could drink a bottle of whiskey in 5 minutes. So it's kind of like tempts you to do things and encourages you to participate in risky behavior. It also can then lead to bullying, bribing, oversharing personal information, and it can really encourage you to do things like expose yourself whilst online, participate in harmful behavior whilst online, so daring you to cut your arm or cut your body whilst online. So it's very important that we are mindful of conduct risk, because that's very prevalent whilst online. And if you're vulnerable, if you're online looking for friendships and so forth, you're often lured into these types of behavior, like, I will be your friend if you show me your breast, or if you show me your personal, your personal parts of your body. So that often happens whilst online, particularly to people who's lonely, isolated, vulnerable, and trying to establish friendships. So that's conduct risk. And the final one is consumer risk. And that includes marketing, encouraging you to look at things that you probably don't want to look at. It puts pressure on you to buy things, to participate in things. It also encourages what generally happens is if you're interested in looking at, let's say, television, then you will you might Google the cheapest television or a particular make, and then as soon as you put on your devices, you get a bombardment of other type of risk, other type of items that you may not want to participate in, or you may not want to have any access to or even see. But because of the way the structures are set up, they bombard you with all types of consumer activities that you may get yourself involved in, and that generally leads to financial abuse. It can become very addictive if you're into gaming. It can encourage you to game, to gamble, and so forth. So consumer risk is very critical. And even though we've identified 4 here in terms of the typology, sometimes things overlap. So you can be involved in conduct risk as well as consumer risk. So it's not segregated. Sometimes there's overlap with the 4 types of risk. And the reason why I wanted to just highlight the risk for you is that when you look at the 4 different types, it helps you to understand the different types of risk that you might encounter, or the people that you're working with might encounter whilst they're in the digital space. So I've just really given you a quick overview of what these risks look like, but we are going to send further details to Steve, who can then disseminate the information to yourself, and you can then have a really closer delve into what I've just been sharing with you. So just wanted to move on to look at who's responsible. And I think a couple of people in the chat raised issues around responsibilities. What should we do if we're confronted with these types of challenges? Well, it's a collective responsibility, and it's really important that as teachers, you're aware and you are responsible for your learners, your beneficiaries, and you're responsible to ensure that you share with them how to create a safe space within the digital environment. So we have, as I said earlier on, we've developed a whole range of documentation that will help you to look at how you can ensure that you're safe whilst you're online. And we encourage you to promote good practice within the digital space. We've got the guidance, we've got tools, we've got assessment and documentation where you can review, have a look at, so that you make sure that yourself as well as your learners are safe whilst they're online. And it's really important that as teachers, you ensure that your students understand the dangers of being online as well as the benefits, but also to ensure that they know how to and what to report should they be confronted with the situation as earlier described. As I said, we've got the guidance online where you can access it through our intranet page, where we'll give you I'll share some details towards the end of this presentation. So I guess this slide is really saying that we have a collective responsibility. It's not just one person's responsibility. It's not Steve's responsibility. It's not Fiona's responsibility. It's a collective responsibility. So we're all responsible to ensure that we remain safe online, as well as our beneficiaries and our learners. So just moving to the next slide. Somebody mentioned or alluded to privacy. I just wanted to share with you that the British Council seeks and supports that all users are seeks and supports and want to inform all users of their choices around privacy. And there's guidance also on our line to help you to understand how you can put your privacy notices on your devices so that people cannot access your information, and you can block people where there's unwanted contact. So if somebody tries to contact you via that contact risk that I spoke about earlier on, there are ways in which you can prevent that by blocking them from your system. Another way in terms of keeping private so that you don't get that consumer risk is to always clear your browsers and your cookies. So every time you go into the internet or onto your devices, always clear, when you leave it, before you leave it, always clear away the browser and the cookies that you've been using. And in fact, one of the tips is to suggest that when you go online, there's usually a in terms of reference that says, do you accept all the cookies? You don't have to accept the cookies. It's your choice, but the advice is that you don't accept the cookies, and in not accepting it, then they don't have that your footprint on the system. So I would encourage not to accept the cookies. Again, we've got all notes as to how you can clear your cookies, how you can clear your internet browsers and so forth. So just finally moving on to coming to the close of this presentation, we want to really make sure that, I mean, we've highlighted the digital risk, we've highlighted the safeguarding risk, we've highlighted how abuse could take place online, and sometimes unexpectedly you might encounter abuse online. You might not even be aware that you're being abused until it gets to a point where it's quite frightening and quite worrying. So we want to make sure that everybody knows how to keep themselves safe, and if they should be confronted in any way, form, or if it manifests itself in any way, that they know how to report a concern. So it's important as teachers that you understand how to do so, and also that you share with your learners how they could report any concerns that they encounter whilst online. And on this slide, you can see that if there's any concerns, if you have any concerns or any worries, or you want to discuss an issue that's come to your attention, this is that we have our safeguarding.britishcouncil.org email address where you can email us. We will give you advice. We will discuss any concerns that you have, and we will follow up any allegations that's been made or any concern that's been brought to our attention. But it's really important that it's reported to us, because we've had situations where there's been incidents online, and there've been really, really serious incidents whilst participating in a British Council activity. And it's our responsibility as the safeguarding team to pursue an investigation in relation to whatever's reported to us. So please feel free to make contact with Fiona or myself if you have any concerns about anything that's happened online. Even if you just want to have a discussion with us to just check whether or not this is the type of abuse, please feel free to make contact with us. Just moving on to resources. We've been mentioning that we've developed and designed a number of resources. That just recently we've commissioned a team of experts to work alongside us to develop some resources that will help to ensure that we are all kept safe whilst online. So this is a list of some of the resources that we have that you can access via our intranet page. But we've highlighted the digital safeguarding apps guide, because that's something that Steve said he was really wanting us to speak about. So I would encourage, I know there was 3 specific apps that Steve made reference to, but we have got a larger document, we've got a larger document of all the, not all, but the majority of familiar apps that's used, having done some research in British Council to see which ones were the most familiar ones. And we've put together a guide in terms of which apps are, measures in terms of how you can ensure that you're safe using a particular app. So for instance, if you was using, let's say WhatsApp or Telegram or Zoom, we've got guidance as to how you can ensure that you have you've undertaken a risk assessment to ensure that all the possible measures are put in place. And even if you undertake the risk assessment, or you look at the guidance, there's things that you haven't put in place. The issue is that you now know that they're not in place. So you have to think about, well, what measures can you put in place to ensure that you remain safe online or your learners remain safe online. So that digital safeguarding app guide is really, really critical for yourselves to have a look at, just to have some confidence that you've put measures in place to mitigate some of the safeguarding risks. So that's why we've highlighted that there, because we haven't got the time to go through all the apps that you had highlighted that you use. I mean, we're aware that in teaching, teachers use a whole range of different apps and platforms. So that's the guidance that we've produced. But we also have a digital risk assessment. So if the app is not in the guidance, use the digital risk assessment to see what possible measures you can put in place to minimize, reduce any potential risk in terms of the apps or the platforms that you are using. And as you can see, we've got our core guidance, our statements, we've got online safety for children, for adults, for teenagers, etc., etc. You can access any of this information via our website. And finally, I think we have also developed some videos, short videos, just to consolidate what we mean when we speak about safeguarding risk, digital risk, online abuse, and so forth. And you can access any one of them. And I guess just to conclude with this presentation, I don't know if we've got time to just do a 4-minute overview, or if we should just pull it to a close, because I guess there might be some questions that people might wish to ask. So, Steve, I've taken the lead from you, what you think would be best to do.
I think we can actually we can share the video very quickly, and if there's an opportunity for for questions, we can actually come to the questions. I'm going to play. I'm going to quickly play the video.
Okay. Thank you.
Digital technology offers huge benefits for efficiency and reach, and at the British Council we've really embraced this. Transforming our digital capabilities and delivery is at the heart of Strategy 2025 and crucial to supporting our growth ambitions. Importantly though, we've also had to ensure that safeguarding is embedded into everything we do. We want to take this opportunity to talk about what we've put in place and how everyone at the British Council has a part to play in safeguarding our teams, clients and partners.
Safety and
I think due to connectivity issue, I think I'll have to stop it there because the video is quite heavy and the connectivity is not actually following. So we can potentially answer 2 questions. We have 2 questions in the chat. The first one is from Mohammed Nazravid. So he's asking how we can actually protect our students from the different kind of risk that Ellen has just shared, the 4 types of risk. I'm not sure, Ellen, would you like to maybe kind of summarize quickly the way we can actually potentially kind of protect learners from these risks?
Yeah, I think one of the key things, Steve, that we would, or I'm not sure who raised the question, but one of the key things is that having had this very brief presentation, I think it's for teachers to further familiarize themselves with the possibility of the risk online. And I would like to suggest that you have a look at our guidance and you share with your students ways in which they can protect themselves online in terms of the 4 typologies that was shared with you today. So I think raising their awareness, sensitizing them, upskilling them to understand safety around online abuse and exploitation and digital risk is one of the ways in which you could minimize the risk. So awareness raising from yourselves to your students.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Thanks. We have another one from Emmanuel again. Emmanuel is asking how can governments or organizations ensure that learners are protected from content abuses, given the growing business of developing application for edutech edtech programs.
I'll share my views and then Elaine can come in. I mean, that's a good one. And I guess maybe when I think about government to start off with, I mean, what I've seen, again, when you do research and read up, in some contexts, in some environments, states have, made strides in putting in place legislation and clear laws that govern online interaction, online use, online consumption. And that's all geared at protecting users, making sure that there is responsible use of, online spaces, clearly outlining what is a breach, and that goes a long way in protecting citizens, whether that be children or adults. So I know that is one critical area that governments can do, putting in place strong legislation and guidance on how, and also regulating. I'll tell you, in my country at some point, because there was just too much hate speech going around, Facebook as a particular platform was restricted, and we couldn't use it. If we had to use it, we had to circumvent, we use VPNs and that sort of thing. But that, that's a bit extreme, but I'm just giving you examples of some of the steps governments can do. For me, it's largely around strong legislation and actual implementation of this. And organizations, I think there is a strong responsibility on ensuring that any, an example of what we're doing now with this program is, we know we have a digital offer in terms of how this program has been designed and how it's going to be delivered. So the onus is on us to ensure that the people that we are working with on this program, such as yourselves, have an understanding and appreciation of the risk, but also more importantly, how this is mitigated and managed. So equally, my expectation is that organizations out there take the same responsibility. And something I can't overemphasize is around awareness. You cannot protect yourself from what you do not know. And therefore, the need to continually create awareness, sensitization, sharing of information becomes very, very important. Some people become victims of abuse purely because they don't know that in me sharing my nudes, that is abusive and exploitative. So awareness creation and information sharing is very, very critical. And people knowing that when this happens, what do I do? Where do I report? Because for us to be able, the collective responsibility of whether state or non-state actors to, curb and fight some of these vices comes from knowing and understanding the trends. And, that comes from information being shared, reports being made and, being flagged. So the point Elaine made just before around how do we help our learners, on top of equipping them with the tips, they also need to be equipped with the knowledge of, if something bad happens, if there is an inappropriate engagement, how do you, where do you report, where do you go? So it's a combination of different approaches, I would say, that need to be undertaken by different stakeholders. Elaine talked about a collective responsibility. And so for me, that transcends to not just ourselves, but different other stakeholders is what I guess I can share.
Thanks very much, Ellen, would you like to add something to?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Fiona said already, I mean, I'm based out in the UK, so I just want to share with you that at this point in time, legislation is going through Parliament to ensure that content that's shared is appropriate, and any organisation, any providers that allows for content to be distributed and harmful content to be distributed will be prosecuted. And I believe that once that's passed in the UK, it might have a ripple effect throughout other countries, because we recognise the danger of online abuse and the risk, the safeguarding risk that online can perpetuate. So that's what's happening in the UK. In terms of how we, protect people from content, I think what we're doing here is one of the ways that we do it. And I can only speak for British Council, which is why we commissioned that expert organisation to work alongside us to develop all the resources, the key resources that we require, that will enable us to keep our teachers, learners, beneficiaries, partners safe. And it's about upskilling, sensitizing, and making people aware of what these risks are and how we can mitigate. So that's my answer to the question that was just raised.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much. I think there's a lot of information to take away here. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. And again, I hope that the information shared by our expert speakers from British Council safeguarding team was valuable and informative, because obviously as teachers we will have a duty to care, a duty of care, to ensure that the safety of and well-being of our students is actually taken into account. And this includes when we use mobile devices in the classroom and outside the classrooms. And I am actually sure that by implementing some of these best practices discussed in this webinar, we can all help to create a safer online learning environment for our students. So I would just encourage everyone to continue learning and sharing knowledge with your colleagues and your learners. The British Council English Programs team offers a bunch of resources, and we're here to support you. Deliver engaging and effective learning, teaching, including on the topic of digital safety. The safeguarding team has shared some resources that have been developed, and we will be sharing these resources with you so you can have available guidance to support you on safeguarding issues related to mobile device. So again, feel free to contact the safeguarding team for any anything that you would like to report in terms of safeguarding issues, and you can contact us via our website. Again, you can find this information on our website, but you can also write directly to the digital safeguarding team at safeguarding@britishcouncil.org. So thanks for joining us. So again, we wish you all the best in your teaching and learning journey. So again, the recording for this webinar will be available very soon on Teach English Africa. We'll share the details so you can watch and share with your colleagues. Thanks so much. Thanks, Shona. Thanks, Ellen, for your time and for the expertise.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks very
Dave.
much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.